We were opened in 2010, but we are so excited. We're one of the few places in the country, states, that have a Women's Heritage Center that honors our past, our present, and our future. And you can tell our theme is up on the board, adding her story to history to tell our story. Because there's so many places and books that have left women out of history, so that's part of our aim. We have a theme each year. This year it's Women in Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics, which you'll see here. And you'll also be hearing Women of Goddard talk about the display that's in the back. And I know some of you have been looking at it. The women that are there are featured on that display. So we are so lucky to have them with us and look forward to hearing telling us their stories.
Linda, thanks a whole lot. We're all very pleased to be here, and we're sorry that the light makes the visuals not quite as good as they would have been in a really dark room, but hopefully you can see them well enough. So we're all here to illustrate for you how exciting it can be if you get an education in science and engineering, science or engineering. There are all sorts of really, really exciting things you can do. And so we're just showing you some of those from our careers, and hopefully some of these will sort of spark your interest in just the huge variety of what you can do if you get a science and engineering education. So in my case, as Linda mentioned, I have been to the Antarctic and also to the North Pole. And so I'm going to show some of the pictures from the Antarctic first, although this particular, this cover picture is from the North Pole area. This one is the expedition team to Antarctica. If you, in a dark room, you'd be able to see that I'm the only female. I was the only female on the expedition, the only female on the ship going down, the only female on the entire island we were on. At that time, this was when I was a graduate student way back in the early 1970s. At that time, almost no females had ever gone down to Antarctica to do research, and so it was very unusual. The captain of the ship, who's actually one of the individuals on this photo, the captain of the ship was extremely upset when he found out a female was coming on his ship. He had never had a female go down to Antarctica before, and this was very upsetting to him, although after a couple of days he was very nice and quite all right with it. It was just a real shock at first. So this is on our way to Antarctica in the ship. This is as we're getting close. You start seeing some ice, and then a little more ice, and then more ice, and then you start seeing beautiful scenery along the edge of Antarctica, and then you get nothing but ice, ice and snow. It was thrilling to get to go down there. We were working on a volcanic island just off the continent itself, and so there's some volcanic ash around here, and you could also, I'm kind of walking toward where the well was because we had to collect our water whenever we wanted water for anything, drinking or anything else. We had to go collect it from the well. Every day when we went out to work, we would go out to work in this little rubber boat called a Zodiac. So we would travel in the little rubber Zodiac boat across to get to the other side because of the volcanic activity. It was felt we had to sleep on the side that was furthest away from the volcanic activity. But our research itself was actually right at the center of the volcano, and so that was very exciting. It was very steep, and you can see, well, partly you can see from this picture how steep it was. This is the, I was a graduate student, this is the leader of the expedition, struggling down on this very steep volcanic slope, and what we were measuring was the ice flowing back in to the volcano. So in other words, the volcano had erupted, but there had been ice all over because it is Antarctica. So there had been ice and snow all over. Volcano erupted, got ash all over everything, but the ice went and flowed back in. So that's what we were measuring there. Because of the volcanic activity, there's a lot of heat, and the very top layer of the water was really, it was a challenge for that everybody who went down there at that time. You were challenged to, can you swim in this water? All the water was freezing cold except the very top layer was scalding hot because of the volcanic activity. So the trick was you stir it up enough so that it's bearable. And so, being the only female on the island, I had to do this. You know, there was just no way that I was not going to take this challenge and swim in this water. And it was neat to get to do that. Now, for those who are close enough to see, there are thousands of penguins on this island, and here are several hundreds of the penguins on this island. Here I am right in amongst the penguins. And actually at that time, now you wouldn't be allowed to pick the penguins up, and I'm very glad that they made that rule. But at that time, way back in the early 70s, the regulations weren't there. That's like one of my favorite pictures that I took of a penguin. So that's my favorite picture that I took of a penguin. That's my favorite picture that I took of an elephant seal. So that's an elephant seal. Now we came back on a different boat, a different ship than the one we went down on. We went down on the little ship that I showed you before. We came back on a tourist ship. This is the Lindblad Explorer. That's another cool thing about being a scientist. We got free passage on this ship just by giving a few talks to the tourists. So if you become a scientist, you can do some really neat tourist type stuff, but get paid for it by giving a few talks. So that's another huge plus there of being a scientist. And here's a picture of the big Lindblad Explorer with the ice of Antarctica in the background. Now, another expedition I was on is up in the Bering Sea, which is the sea that's in between Alaska and Siberia. So that sea has a lot of ice in it, but this is before we got to the ice cover. And we sent up balloons with instruments on them to get measurements of the atmospheric conditions. And then we put buoys into the ocean. And here we're pulling one of these buoys out to get measurements that in the ocean. But the key thing we were looking for was measurements of the ice. And now this might not be all that apparent, but there's a lot of ice in this picture. And there's also some instrumentation of taking radiation measurements on that platform. Here's the ship we were on in the Bering Sea, and if you look closely right in the left of it, there's a helicopter. And so we took the helicopter to get to the much bigger ice flows further away. And here I am at the main meteorological tower we had a little bit further away from the ship. But for most of our work, we were actually working fairly close to the ship, and we would go by a boat. We would get in the boat and be lowered down from the ship, and then go out to the smaller sea ice flows. Even a sea ice flow of that size that you see in the upper right there, you can actually walk on and not feel too worried about falling. And so I was standing on a flow about that size here, and we were about to put our buoys out. And here, we drill a hole, and then stick the buoy in it, and the buoy had a little radar transmitter at the top that we would then measure from the ship. And here I am sort of hooking up a big orange ball that would help us with the helicopter later to spot exactly where it was so we could go pick up the buoy in the end. So, and then the final trip that I'm going to tell you about is a trip that I was chief scientist on for NASA in 1999, and it was to the North Pole, but by way of Resolute Bay, which is a small Inuit community in northern Canada. This is pretty much the whole community shown there. 202 people, and no other towns or communities for like hundreds of miles. So, you know, that was the whole community. The Canadian government flies in once a month nurse and dentist in case there are any needs for medical attention. And so there's no nurse or dentist or doctor living in the community. And there's also practically no crime in the community because everybody knows everybody else. And so there's only there are 2 policemen for a gigantic area, not just this community, but communities over hundreds of miles around. And so here's a little bit more on the community. The church is in the left there. This is the house that we stayed in for a week as we were preparing for the North Pole expedition. This is the team. Again, I was the only female. However, by this time, you could have had more females. It just turned out that the people who signed up for this trip were males, mostly, other than me. And here I am with one of the Inuits with his dog. Here we encountered a real Arctic storm. That was kind of exciting. Here we're setting up our tents in Eureka, which was another stop on the way to the North Pole. Eureka is on the island, Ellesmere Island, which is just to the west of Greenland. It's in northern Canada, 80 degrees north. Here, flying over the Arctic sea ice, and here we had to stop. We had one stop from Eureka to the North Pole to resupply the fuel. The plane was not big enough to carry both us and all the fuel, so we had to cache some fuel on a sea ice floe halfway there and then stop, pick up that fuel, dump off the empty fuel tanks, and then go the rest of the way. Here we are, having landed about 2 miles from the North Pole, and this is what we hooked up with there. We hooked up with the dog sled team, which was really cool. The North Pole there's floating ice in the North Pole. It's very different from the South Pole, whereas at the South Pole, it's ice that's on top of land. The North Pole, the ice is floating. So you can't be confident with a plane that you're going to be able to land at the North Pole. However, dog sleds are much more able to get you to the exact North Pole, which is what we wanted. So we hooked up with the dog sled team. There I am with one of the dogs. Here we are on the dog sled trip, and here we are headed to the North Pole, and we got to the exact spot, and this is me with the leader of the dog sled team at the exact spot of the North Pole. So those are expeditions that I've been on. Very, very cool to get to go on expeditions like this and take measurements that are of some scientific value. So it's one of the types of really cool things that scientists and engineers get to do. But another really cool thing that I get to do in my career is be involved with satellite imagery and satellite data. I'm the project scientist of a particular mission called the Aqua mission. Aqua spacecraft is shown on the left here, and you can see the size because you've got people at the bottom. So that was before we launched. And then the launch is showed on the right. We launched back in 2002, so we've just finished a 10-year anniversary of our launch. We've gotten all sorts of great data. It's really exciting to see a launch and to know that something you've been working on for years is successfully finally getting up into space. And so here are some images from that spacecraft. Here's one of a hurricane. This happens to be Hurricane Irene, which many of you will have remembered from a year ago. So that's satellites are so valuable to us in terms of showing us where hurricanes are and how they're tracking well before they reach land. Years ago, before satellites were available, hurricanes would strike sometimes without any forewarning at all. And we're so lucky now to have satellites that let us know that there's a hurricane out there. Another really valuable aspect is the satellites show fires really well. The U.S. Forest Service has used these images, which I'm sorry don't show up well on the with so much light, but they show fires really well, and that's really valuable for the U.S. Forest Service to determine where to deploy firefighters. They showed that oil slick from Deepwater Horizon oil spill. They show lots of global images. Here happens to be all the radiation that's going out to space from the Earth. They show things like the number of fires in a particular year, and we're of course most concerned about the fires in the U.S., but if you look at a global picture like this, you'll see that fires in the U.S. are really very infrequent compared to how many fires you get in especially the tropical rainforest areas where there are huge, huge, huge numbers of fires. Now here we also get to see the sea ice cover, which is what much of my work has been involved with, and original pictures tend to have lots of missing data that we then have to analyze and then get much better pictures out. This is the Arctic case, and in the Arctic in the wintertime on the left, it's way, way, way more ice than in the summertime, which is on the right. In the wintertime, the amount of ice, it covers an area about 1.5 times the area of the United States. So a whole lot of area is covered. And then we plot it up. So this goes back to 1978 up to 2010. And every year, way more ice in the winter, way less ice in the summer. And so what we really want to look at is how's it changing over time. So we take that cycle out, and when we do that, that same set of data becomes this set of data, and you can see how the Arctic sea ice has been going down. That's been important in terms of looking at climate change, and the sea ice has become kind of iconic in terms of the sea ice decreases in the Arctic are one of the very strong indicators of global warming that people have become quite concerned about, and polar bears are often mentioned as one of the species that's been really hurt by the loss of the sea ice. We do have a website that we update every week, so you could get the new sea ice every week if you want. And we also look at the Antarctic just equally as much as we look at the Arctic. And this is wintertime in the Antarctic on the left, which is exactly the opposite time of year from wintertime in the northern hemisphere. So wintertime in the Antarctic is February, it's a September picture, and summertime is a February picture. In the Antarctic, the results are opposite from the Arctic in terms of the Antarctic ice has been increasing. A lot of studies are being done to try to understand why. So 2 more slides for me, and these show one other type of thing, and again, we're trying to give you a flavor of you can do really exciting things if you become a scientist or an engineer. And one of the things I've really enjoyed doing is getting to write books. Linda had mentioned that I've written several books, and I enjoy both writing them by myself, and the 2 on the left I did by myself, but I also enjoy working with other people and writing books that are either edited with other people or written with other people, and one of those is on the right. And then last slide is 3 more of my books. The one on the left was actually history of science, because I'm really interested in the history of science also. And then the one in the middle is modeling of science, and that was with colleague Warren Washington. And then the one at the bottom right, we actually have copies. We have copies for everybody here if you would like copies. We have copies both of the book, if you would like those, and also small versions of the 6 posters that Linda mentioned also. So we've got those for everybody here, and Florence and Mary and I are all both on the posters and in the book.